waters. The assassination of JFK, November 22nd, 1963, a date etched in history. This wasn't just the killing of a president, it was a full-blown rupture in the fabric of America. The official story, that lone gunman, Oswald, taking out Kennedy, a lot of people, and I'm talking serious researchers, historians, they just ain't buying it. There's this nagging feeling, like something's off, like we're not getting the full picture. And the more you dig into this thing, the more you start to see these weird connections, these inconsistencies, these straight-up WTF moments that the official narrative just can't explain away. We're talking about the CIA, shadow governments, the whole 9 yards. It's some real cloak and dagger stuff, so buckle up, because over the next hour we're going to break down 7 signs that point to something way more sinister than a lone gunman. We're talking about the possibility that JFK's assassination was an inside job orchestrated by none other than the CIA. Get ready to have your mind blown. All right, so to understand this whole thing, we got to rewind the clock to 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion. This was supposed to be the CIA's big win, a covert operation to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba. JFK gives it the green light, but then at the last minute he pulls air support. The invasion turns into a complete disaster. American-backed forces get slaughtered and Castro gets to puffing his chest even harder. This is where it gets interesting. The CIA is pissed. They're fuming. They felt like Kennedy hung them out to dry, made them look weak. This wasn't just some bureaucratic blunder. This was a huge embarrassment on the world stage, and the CIA doesn't forget things like that. Some people believe this humiliation, this sense of betrayal, planted the seeds of something dark and vengeful within the agency. We're talking about an organization with a history of covert ops, assassinations, toppling governments. Could they have seen JFK as a liability after the Bay of Pigs, a loose cannon they needed to silence? Now, after the assassination, everyone's looking for answers. Enter the Warren Commission. This government-appointed group, headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren, was tasked with investigating JFK's death. Their conclusion? Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Case closed. Except, not so far. See, the Warren report has been riddled with controversy from day one. Critics point to inconsistencies in witness testimonies, evidence that was ignored or mysteriously disappeared. And the fact that the Commission seemed more interested in protecting the official narrative than uncovering the truth. We're talking about the most powerful man in the world getting killed, and they're wrapping it up like some open and shut case. It just doesn't sit right. Plus, there were some seriously shady characters connected to the investigation, guys with ties to organized crime, intelligence agencies, you name it. It's like stepping into one of those old film noir movies where nobody's who they seem. Let's talk about the Zapruder film, man. This home movie, shot by a bystander named Abraham Zapruder, captured the assassination in gruesome detail. It's chilling, man, but it's also the most analyzed piece of film in history, and for good reason. See, the Zapruder film seems to contradict the official narrative. When you slow it down, frame by frame, you see things, man, like the way Kennedy's head snaps back, violently, as if hit from the front. That doesn't line up with Oswald supposedly shooting from behind. Then there's the mysterious grassy knoll, an area where many witnesses claim to have seen a second shooter. The Zapruder film, it's like a Rorschach test for conspiracy theorists. Every frame sparks more questions, more doubts, more fuel for the fire that maybe, just maybe, there was more than one gunman that day in Dallas. All right, let's talk about Lee Harvey Oswald. This is where the rabbit hole gets really deep. The official story paints him as a disgruntled loner, a communist sympathizer who acted alone. But here's the thing, Oswald's past is shady as hell. We're talking about a guy who defected to the Soviet Union, then came back and somehow managed to get a job at the Texas School Book Depository, which just happened to have a perfect view of Kennedy's motorcade route. And get this, there's evidence Oswald had contact with CIA operatives in the months leading up to the assassination. Coincidence? Maybe, but it gets weirder. Oswald always maintained his innocence, claiming he was a patsy, and there are those who believe he was set up to take the fall for something much bigger. Now, this is where things get really creepy. In the years following the assassination, a string of people connected to the case started dying under very suspicious circumstances. We're talking witnesses, investigators, journalists. You name it. Some died in freak accidents, others committed suicide, and a few were even murdered. Now, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy to silence everyone who knew too much, but it's hard to ignore the sheer number of people who died under questionable circumstances. It's enough to make you wonder, what did these people know, and why were they considered dangerous enough to silence? Now, this is where the CIA's involvement gets really unsettling. Operation Northwoods, this was a top-secret plan cooked up by the CIA in the early 60s. Their goal, to stage a series of terrorist attacks on American soil, blame it on Cuba, and use it as a pretext to invade the island and take out Castro. I'm talking about bombing US cities, sinking boats full of refugees, even faking attacks on Guantanamo Bay. They were willing to kill innocent Americans just to justify a war. Thankfully, Kennedy shot the plan down, but it shows you the lengths the CIA was willing to go to achieve their objectives. It's chilling, man. If they were willing to consider something as insane as Operation Northwoods, what else were they capable of? Look, we're talking about the CIA here, an organization with a long and bloody history of covert operations toppling governments, and yes, even assassinations. I mean, they were involved in the overthrow of Mossadegh in Iran, Arbenz in Guatemala, Lumumba in the Congo. These guys played dirty, and they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. So when you consider the CIA's track record, their motive after the Bay of Pigs, and all the inconsistencies surrounding JFK's assassination, it's not that crazy to think they might have been involved. Look, the assassination of JFK, it's a wound that never fully healed in the American psyche. It's one of those events that makes you question everything you thought you knew, makes you wonder if the official narrative is just a carefully constructed facade. We may never know the full truth about what happened that day in Dallas, but these 7 signs suggest that the CIA's involvement can't be ruled out. Was it a rogue faction within the agency? Was it a high-level conspiracy that went all the way to the top? Or was it just a tragic coincidence? A lone gunman changing the course of history? It's up to each of us to look at the evidence, to ask the tough questions, and to come to our own conclusions. Don't just take my word for it, man. Do your own research, check out the declassified documents, watch the Zapruder film, and let me know what you think in the comments below. And hey, while you're there, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're going deep on all sorts of crazy conspiracies, unexplained phenomena, and mind-blowing mysteries right here. Stay curious, my friends.